Today marks the 100th DC Multiverse review that I have uploaded onto this channel, and what better set to talk about than, of course, the Superman vs. Doomsday 2-pack. And without further ado, before I talk about the accessories and the figures, let's take a quick look at the data profile cards that are included. And as you can see, there are two of them, one for Superman and one for Doomsday. They both feature comic book artwork for the photos of the cards, and of course for Superman you do have this iconic moment from the comic that symbolizes the death of the character. And for Doomsday, it features this artwork of the character defeating Superman and a few other DC superheroes. And the source material is from Reign of Doomsday. On the backside, you do have your usual read-ups for both of the characters. I will only read the one for Doomsday, since we already know Superman's origin. It reads, Planet of Origin, Krypton. Doomsday is an alien creature of overwhelming force and savage bloodlust, whose appearance invokes terror. When he first arrived on Earth, his rampage of mindless destruction devastated Metropolis. The carnage ended only after Superman died, putting the mindless beast down. And that's a pretty good description on who Doomsday is as a character. And now, let's talk about the accessories that are included in this set. And this is where the accessory department is very lackluster, because you don't get the bare minimum of accessories at all. And the only figure that comes with any accessories is Superman. And all he has are these two open gesture hands, or flight hands, whatever you want to call these. And that's it. Doomsday doesn't have any accessories. And for a 2-pack that is called Superman vs. Doomsday, whoever made the bright decision that Superman does not need any fist hands is stupid. This is a 2-pack where Superman definitely needs fist hands, especially if you want to pose the Superman figure on the shelf punching Doomsday. You can't even do that because he doesn't have any fist hands. And this is the thing that frustrates me about this set the most, is the accessories, because these two figures would have benefited if they had interchangeable hands. You look at Doomsday, it would have been nice if he had another pair of fist hands for his right arm. I'm just saying, accessories are also important. It's not just about the figures. And if you're wondering if there is a base of some kind, because usually 2-packs come with these sort of bases, for example, this one in this sort of style, this set doesn't come with any of that. And this was also the first 2-pack to introduce this combination of a mega figure and a regular sized DC figure together in the set. And ever since they introduced this sort of combination, you start to see a pattern with all the other sets that came later, where this sort of special base accessory pretty much was ditched from the box. So that is not great. However, recently with the Dark Knight's Metal, Batman Who Laughs, and the Merciless 2-pack, they finally brought back a sort of special base, which is 10 times bigger than the usual ones we used to see. So that's cool that they brought it back for that set. But my point is, if you're going to make these sort of 2-packs, they should come with something like this, because it does add to the fun of buying these 2-packs. And that's pretty much all I can say for the accessories and the rest of the content in this box. And now let's move on to aesthetics, and let's start with Superman, since he is the more simpler one. And as you can see, he is reusing the same body buck that we've seen countless times. It, of course, is the infected Superman body buck. And the overall design of this Superman is supposed to capture this sort of battle damage look, where he's pretty much getting pummeled by Doomsday. But this is where they kind of fell off with the whole battle damage aesthetic. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of battle damage sort of marks on here. There's very few on this figure, which is really strange. If you ever look back into the comics, and even in the animation adaptations of this story, when he's fighting Doomsday, he's getting pummeled, right? His costume's getting ripped up, he has blood in some places, he has bruise marks in some areas. A lot of that is missing on here, and it makes the costume look way too clean than it should be. So it would have been nice if they added more of this to some areas down here in the pants and even in the stomach area. Like, I'm just saying, there's a lot of places that can benefit from more battle damage marks than what they did here for the final results of this figure. And for the cape, as you can see, they did sculpt it in this way where it looks tattered, but some of these rip marks could have been sculpted in other areas as well. So I'm just pointing out the fact that more battle damage details would have been better if they were present. Now, if you are a customizer, you could probably fix this. You can add your own battle damage marks to certain parts of this figure to make them stand out a lot more. In terms of the head sculpt here, it is a reuse of the Hush Superman head sculpt. It's the same exact sculpting and everything. The only difference is that he has an angry expression here since he is fighting Doomsday. And as you can see, there is a little bit of blood right there by the bottom of his lips. And again, it would have been nice to see more of these like bloody effects in some parts of the suit, right? So yeah. And the head sculpt is not bad. I like this head sculpt. The difference between this one and the Hush version is just the skin tone color. Like for this one, it's more tan, as you can see. And for the Hush version, I believe it was more pale. So there is that. And when we come down to the boots down here, there is a little bit of battle damage down here. I don't know if my camera can capture it, but you see these little like black splotches of paint, like a wash that they did over it. That's supposed to simulate like dirt or something. So there's a little bit of that going on down here, but not a whole lot. And that's pretty much all I can talk about when it comes to the Superman figure, because the rest of this figure is entirely the same as what we've seen on this body buck many times. So there is Superman. And now it's time we talk about the main figure of this 2-pack, and that, of course, is Doomsday. This figure is a monster. Like, when you want a Doomsday figure to invoke this sort of presence of looking menacing on your shelf and also invoking terror, as I said in the data profile card, they did exactly that. This figure does come off looking very menacing with the overall sculpt. And one thing I'll say here is that this is a perfect example of how to reuse parts in a good way, where it doesn't feel lazy. If you look at the top half of this Doomsday figure, it's pretty obvious who they took parts from in order to make this figure. And of course, that is the good old Devastator. And as you can see, all these sculpt details that were on this figure when this figure came out first before this Doomsday, all of this was pretty much meant to go on a Doomsday figure. And I've seen a lot of people do customs using this figure for the basis of a Doomsday. And for the actual Doomsday figure from Mcfarlane Toys, well, that's exactly what they did here. They reused parts from Devastator to make their Doomsday. And it works. And parts that you can tell right away are from Devastator, of course, are the arms. Like, these are the same exact arms. So nothing new here. And the torso area around here, this is where they did a little bit of retooling. As you can see, for the chest area, they did sculpt a new layer over it, and they added some more texture designs to it compared to Devastator, where it's pretty much just a flat surface kind of with his insignia printed on. And for his spikes on the shoulders, you would think that these are the same, but looking at the two of them, they actually retooled these spikes on his shoulders. These have a more curved sort of look to them, and there is more of them than what you see on the Devastator figure. So there's that. And then for the head sculpt, it is a brand new head sculpt. And one thing I love the most about this figure is the fact that for his legs, they are completely new legs. And they made them tall. So I'm really happy that the legs were redone, and instead of, doing this and just reusing these legs, they made new legs for the Doomsday figure. And that's pretty much all I have to say first. And now let's talk about those details that are present on this figure. And let's start with the head sculpt. As you can see, that head sculpt is beautiful. That is exactly what Doomsday looks like. When you look at this figure, you look at that face, you already know it's Doomsday. Now, the only thing I'm confused about here is the whole ponytail thing that's going on. I don't remember this character having hair, but if you read the source material that this design is based from, do let me know in the comments below why he has this sort of design, because a lot of times that I've seen Doomsday, he doesn't have this sort of, ponytail look. That's interesting. And another thing that I like that they carried over from the Devastator figure is, of course, the mouth articulation. As you can see, you can get his mouth to open. and that changes his expression a whole lot. Now he looks even more angry and terrifying in his look, right? So I really like that. And for his torso, as you can see, the details here, all of this is just nicely sculpted. I like the fact that they retooled this torso and added all this new stuff to it. You can see all these like spiky ridges on the bottom of his upper torso, which I love. And then up here, you can see more of these spike details like that are just awesome, right? Like I'm just becoming speechless now with what I want to say. But the material that they use for these spikes are soft plastic. It's not like a hard plastic, so you're not going to poke your fingers with these sort of spikes here. However, you do want to be careful if you have this figure, of course, where certain parts of it are hard plastic. Like this stuff is hard plastic, and on the shoulders here for his arms, you also have like sharp plastic here, so it's not entirely soft plastic with every spiky bit. Now, one thing I will point out here that I think was very lazy is that if you are going to reuse the same arms, well, of course, the sculpting of those arms have their territory. So as you can see right here, this is not skin. This is sculpted fabric that is ripped up from a costume. And if you look back at the Devastator figure, it is painted in this blue color to match his pants. So this is the one thing I don't like about this figure that they left unpainted is the fact that they just left it like this. They could have easily painted this green in the same color as his pants here, so it looks like, you know, part of his suit has been ripped up. Because if you know anything about Doomsday as a character, when he shows up on Earth, he's covered up in like a suit. I believe it was like a dark green color suit or bright green. I forgot what the color was, but it was somewhere along this sort of color. And he pretty much has his entire face covered up in its entirety. And then after fighting members of the Justice League and all that stuff, you start to see his costume just basically fall apart and reveal the monster that's inside. So if you're going to keep this sort of detail here for the arms, or you have this sort of ripped up fabric, it should have been painted. So I'm hoping one day in the future I can paint this myself and just fix this error, because I've seen other people already paint their copy of this figure and fix it with a sort of green. And yeah, it looks way better when it's actually painted. And when you leave it in this sort of gray color, it looks weird, right? So there's that. And then when it comes to the details of his arms, you do have the same spikes, of course, which are pretty cool. And then you get to the hands, you have these sort of spikes as well. So yeah, all of this is soft plastic. But then when you come to his fingers, this is where his nails or his claws, whatever you want to call these, is hard plastic. So it's a mixture of soft plastic and hard plastic with a lot of the spikes. And then on this side of his arms, you get the same sort of details again as well. And again, ripped up fabric that is left unpainted. Not great. For the backside, all the texturing and sculpts of all these spiky parts that were present on Devastator are also on here. So that's really cool. And for his pants, it is in this really glossy green color with some texturing. I would have preferred if this was a matte finish color. I don't like the glossiness of it, but you know, it does add a little bit of a shine to his pants at least. There is this sort of belt that he's wearing here, which was probably part of the entirety of his costume. You do have more of these straps for the bottom part of his pants. And then going down to his lower part of his legs, you can see more of the texture with his skin. And this is where it's kind of weird. Why is this all glossy? Because up here on the top, it's like sort of a matte finish in some places. Let me take a better look at this. Yeah, it is. It's like a little bit of a matte finish in some areas. So it's kind of strange how it's like really glossy down here with the lower half of his legs here, where you can see more of his skin and all that rough rock-like texture. So there's that. You have more of the spiky parts here. And then when you come down to his boots or his shoes, you get more of those little details with the green stuff and all of that. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, he's wearing some really nice looking shoes. And that is pretty much all the details of this figure. It's really simplistic. However, The execution here is great. I love the fact that this figure looks the way it does, and it captures what Doomsday looks like in the comics. This is what he wears. He wears a green pants and green shoes. All right, let's talk about the articulation of these figures, and I'm only going to focus on Doomsday because we already seen the articulation for this figure before. It was in my Eradicator review, since that figure and this figure share the same body buck. Everything's exactly the same, so there's no point of covering the articulation for the Superman. And for Doomsday here, let's start with his head sculpt, and I'm going to try to show this to the best of my ability. He can look up, but it's not in the best way possible because he does have this sort of hunchback sort of sculpt here with the top part of his neck, so his back part of his head will just run into that, so he can't look up entirely. When it comes to looking down, that's not a problem, so if you want him to stare down as Superman, he can do exactly that. When it comes to turning his head left and right, he can look to his left or his right, but keep in mind, these little spike details on the bottom of his chin, they will run into the sculpted spike parts of his shoulders. So that's one problem right there. And for his tilting, he can tilt his head left and right. He can also rotate his head in some crazy ways. So the articulation with the head sculpt is pretty okay, but it does have a little bit of hindrance. And of course, he does have the mouth articulation. Let's just point that out again. And for his arms, he will have some hindrance when it comes to lifting them out in this way, because the sculpted details here on the shoulders will run into the sculpted part of the upper part of his shoulders right here. So you're not going to get them into a T-pose of any kind. You can swing his arms back and forth like this without any problems. And for his upper part of his arm here, he does not have a bicep cut. However, since this is a mega figure, and usually with these monstrous looking figures, they have a single jointed arm that can bend 90 degrees. And they also have a swivel here to compensate for the missing bicep cut. So there's that. And for his hands, he does have swivel here, and there is an articulation for the wrists. It's really tight, but as you can see, it did move a little bit. Everything is pretty much kind of like in this ratchet jointed articulation because of how big this figure is. So a lot of his joints are pretty stiff. For his torso, he does have really good rotation for the movement. When it comes to leaning forward, it's not exactly the best, but it can work. So you can see he can lean forward a little bit. Leaning back, also not the greatest, but it can go back a little bit. So for my copy of this figure, there are some QC problems. Maybe it's just my copy and not yours, but his waist area is like really tight for my copy. It does rotate if I heat it up, but after I try to rotate it like normally without using a hairdryer, it will not move. It will just stay frozen shut. So I can't really show the articulation here for his waist. So let's move on to his legs. And this is where the next quality control issue comes in. So for his legs, when it comes to splitting them outward to do some sort of split, it works. You got a sort of split going on here. So that's a pretty good spread with his legs. But when it comes to kicking out his legs, both of the legs on my copy of the figure, they don't want to move. And I do not want to force them to kick out because I'm scared I'll break something here. And I don't want to do that at all. So I'm going to just leave them like that. But if your copy can kick out even better than mine, then clearly there's something wrong with the legs here for my copy of this figure. And when we come down to the articulation for the bottom half here, it is single jointed and you do have swivel. So that's really cool. And of course, for his feet, there is articulation. It is connected to a ratchet joint of some kind, so it's really stiff, but you can get it to move. And there is a little bit of swivel as well. Now, unfortunately, there is no toe articulation on this figure, which is not great. It would have been awesome if he had toe articulation, so the poses can be even better. And that's pretty much all the articulation on this Doomsday figure. It's pretty simple. If you can pose them into some good action poses, then you're definitely going to get them into some cool poses on your shelf. All right, I'm going to set them up right here so we can move on to some comparisons. And let's have them next to, of course, the Superman from the set, so you can see the differences here between their sizes. Hopefully he doesn't fall. Don't fall. Okay. Don't. Okay, he does not want to stand. There we go. He's standing. As you can see, this Doomsday towers over Superman, which is really cool because this is what I want to see here. I want this character to be intimidating and have this sort of menacing vibe on the shelf, and it captures exactly that. So there's the Superman. Here he is next to Devastator, the Doomsday that has pretty much been my Doomsday on my shelf for a long time, before this figure was even a thing. And as you can see, they are quite different in size. Devastator is very small next to Doomsday. So there is the size comparison there. And now let's bring in some other figures to compare him to. Here he is next to Lex Luthor, who is also another good matchup here. You can have this sort of scenario where maybe Lex is able to mind control Doomsday for his own evil deeds. So that's a possibility. Here he is next to Steel. And he's taller than Steel. And you could probably have Steel fight Doomsday. That's another possibility right there. So that's cool. Here he is next to the Articulation. Here he is next to the New 52 Cyborg Superman. That's a pretty cool pairing right there. I think this is probably something that can also work on the shelf, and I like this. Here he is next to the Action Comics 1000 Superman. This could also work as well. I really like what I'm seeing here because I've never actually had these two figures next to each other. And if you've seen some of my photos, I always have them on my table where I work on my computer most of the time. So he's never been paired up with this Superman ever. This is the first time I have him next to this Superman. And yeah, that's pretty cool. And last but not least, we have to have him next to the Silver Age Superman. And that is a pairing right there that can definitely work. And I think in the future, when I set up a better shelf display, I will probably have this Doomsday fighting this Superman for sure, because they look good together. And that's pretty much all the comparisons for today's video. And I just dropped a few figures. In terms of my final thoughts about this set, I still love this 2-pack for what it is, even if there are flaws, such as the lack of accessories, which is the biggest flaw of them all, and the fact that these two figures have their own flaws when it comes to their articulation and some areas that could have been painted better. I love both of these figures. They are still really cool to have in my collection. And one thing I want to note here is that I do have a spare set of this that is unopened, and I have that because it was an accidental pre-order that I couldn't cancel. At the time, that was a pre-order placeholder that I set because I was very scared that I wouldn't be able to find this set in stores, because I was really worried that it would sell out, because it is Doomsday, right? It's a really cool looking figure. So when I found this on Street Date, I was able to get this in stores. And when I went home to cancel that pre-order, it was already too late. So they shipped it out to me. And I had the opportunity to return it, but I decided, you know what? This is the first time I'll ever keep two of the same things. I don't ever buy two of each things every time I buy like new figures. I know some people do who have collections like that, but for me, I never do any of that. So for this one, I was like, you know what? Screw it. Just keep it. And now I'm a proud owner here of two sets of these. I have an unopened one and I have an open one. So just something I want to point out right there. And that's pretty much it. So if you found today's review of the Superman versus Doomsday 2-pack informative, smash that like button. If you want to subscribe to the channel for more action figure content and whatever else I do on here, it would be much appreciated. And with that said, take care, and I will see you in the next video.